Hi, and welcome to the Coastal Carolina Community College Small Business Center. We're here today with a great program. We have Mr. Steve Gill, who's with our Business and Industry Department, and a small business counselor that's going to facilitate this great training. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Steve Gill.
All right. Thanks, April. So like April said, I'm Steve Gill, and I'm one of the small business counselors here at Coastal Carolina Community College. And we have two business owners with us today that are going to tell us a little bit about their business. And then we're going to go through some questions and just have a discussion on the impact that COVID-19 has had on small businesses here locally in Onslow County, and what they have endured and how they have weathered the storm, and what maybe the future looks like for their business. So we're going to first start with Brian Vinciguerra, and then after Brian, then Dan Spangler. So Brian, go ahead and tell us a little bit about your business, and then we'll hit Dan.
Okay. All right. Okay, so hi, yeah, my name is Brian Vinciguerra, and I am the owner of Cracked It Escape Games here in Jacksonville, North Carolina. I am the we are the only escape room in Onslow County, and I've been in business for 4 years. I've been a frequent user of the Small Business Center at Coastal Carolina Community College, as well as the Small Business Center network throughout the state. And today I'm here to talk to you about the troubles and turmoils and challenges of working in the COVID-19 environment, as well as what we experienced while we were applying for the Paycheck Protection Program, as well as the EIDL, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass this back to April, and then on over to Dan Spangler.
All right, Dan.
All right.
I got to figure out how to do it again.
All right, there we go. Wonderful. And perfect. All right, guys. So hopefully you're seeing a screen. Yep, there we go. Pops up. All right. So again, one of the things, I know we talked about this as setting this up. I just wanted to give you guys some background on me. So my name is Dan Spangler. I'm the owner of A Dog's Dream. We're actually in Newbern, North Carolina, so we're a little bit north of Onslow County, but I do live in Onslow County. And I wanted to put some quick facts up. So one of the things we talked about when we were setting this class up was even people that have been in business for a little while still have a lot of problems going through this process, the PPP and the EIDL, along with just in general dealing with banks because of this. So a couple quick notes. I've been in business for about 10 years in this one company. I have 4 companies and a nonprofit that I run. I have a master's degree in business leadership. Take it for what it's worth. I have a business degree, but obviously in this situation it hasn't helped at all. I have a relatively large network, and that's one of the things I want to talk about. Hopefully we'll get to some talking points about that. And then along with that, I've been running side hustles since I was a young kid, so being able to adapt and overcome is something that I've worked on and dealt with. And as I spoke with another entrepreneur yesterday, one of the things that we're dealing with in this, and while both Brian and I are both Marines, you know, adapting and overcoming is always a tradition that we do. But in this situation, this is adapting and overcoming, and the situation isn't really fair because we don't even know what the hell is going to happen. Sorry, excuse my French there, guys. But we really don't know what's going to happen, so we don't even know how to adapt and overcome because we don't know where to go. So that's what we're going to talk about for me. And I put up all these fun pictures for everybody since, you know, we're dealing with such a serious topic. I wanted to start it out a little bit fun. So up in the top, those are my 3 dogs that I used to have. The one with the little foam on his nose or on his lip, that's actually whipped cream from Starbucks. That's Spanky. We used my service dog. And then there's me in my wonderful orange tux that some of you guys have seen me in before. And again, me when I was in Iraq playing around with a used bomb. So anyway, just something fun to start it off with, guys. And just I was going to show you, you know, if you ever have any questions, this is our company website. It's adogsdreamnc.com. Feel free to reach out to me if you're here, or if you have questions, you can get the information from the college to get in touch with me. All right, I am all set.
Great, thanks, Dan. Okay.
There you go.
So for our first question, we're going to start with Brian. So, Brian, what did you learn by the end of the process that you wish you knew at the beginning of this process? So, talking about the whole the economic injury disaster loan and the paycheck protection programs. So, tell us, a little bit about that process. I guess, what have you learned from it now that it's been a few weeks since you applied?
Well, the process is archaic, to say the least. I mean, the government put together the program very quickly, and there were a lot of holes in the program. For instance, when the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP, first opened for applications, it was taken down immediately, and then a couple of days later, allowed for people to re-enroll. So what I wish I had known was that speed and time is of the essence. You need to be on these programs as quickly as possible. I don't want to tip my hand too much, but I did not receive, in the first round of funding, I did not receive any money from the PPP. So right now I'm funding my employees either out of my pocket or out of a small bit of the EIDL that I did get. And now I did get a portion of the economic injury disaster loan, the EIDL, which I got $1,000 per employee. What that allowed me to do was to catch my rent back current. So timing and speed were crucial. As far as the EIDL goes, I registered with just my email, and that was it. And plus how to fill out the government forms, they were very confusing. And my PPP loan was kicked back, numerous times. So understanding what you need to fill out and what you need to have prepared, and then having access to all of that information were the two greatest challenges that I had as far as, and what I wish I had known. If there was an expectation of what, like Dan said, we didn't know what we didn't know, and we don't know how to adapt and overcome. I wasn't even prepared to adapt and overcome because I didn't know what information I was supposed to have ready. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass this over. That's kind of my answer for the first question.
Okay, great. Okay, Dan?
So I guess the biggest part of this, and I mentioned in my opening that I had a pretty large network. And one of the things that I've learned is that my network wasn't big enough, because some of the situations that I ran into could have been resolved if I had the right connections and the right processes and knowing the right people in the right network. And again, one of the big ones that we talk about is a bail team. And for anybody that doesn't know, it's BAIL, banker, accountant, insurance, and a lawyer, legal. And again, I've been in business for a while, and I thought I had a well-established bail team, which for the most part I do. But one of the things that I didn't realize in this situation is that there are advantages to having connections with multiple bankers versus one or two that I had, where the situation that I ran into could have been resolved if I would have had the right account set up. Now, again, if you guys don't know, when you went for this program, all the banks were told to service their clients first and then open themselves up to outsiders. And with that, all the bigger banks that were funding these things processed their clients before they took any outsiders. Well, one of my great connections was to a large SBA lender, and when I reached out to him, he said that he couldn't help me because I wasn't a client of their bank. And again, in this situation, I've learned very quickly that my team needs to be a little bit bigger, because having options to be able to utilize resources of other companies, i.e. a big bank, when this kind of stuff happened, would be a huge help for me. So that's a huge lesson that I learned with this. And again, I think for anybody out there, we get complacent sometimes, and even after being in business for a while, I think we got everything. That's where I'm learning things now that, and again, we can never expect the world to have this situation happen this quickly. But having that network would be a big difference for me, so that's something I've definitely learned.
Okay, good. And Brian, you'd mentioned a little bit about that you had received. I'm going to call it the 3P. You had received some of those funds. Okay, so tell us a little bit more about that. And then, did you receive any other funds? And what was the timeline from start to finish before you received any of the funds?
As far as the funds that I did receive, I actually received one of the EIDL grants, which in the program, the grant program was authorized up to $10,000 or $1,000 per employee up to a $10,000 cap. That's what I actually applied for and received. Now the 3P loan that I applied for through my bank, I had applied for it 3 weeks ago, and it took my bank over a week to process the application process. And by the time my application had been processed, the funding had closed out. So the first round of 3P funding that was available, I completely missed that boat because, again, I did not jump on the bandwagon as quickly as possible, hoping that we were going to be able to open and get back to business as quickly as possible. So with this new round of funding, hopefully my application is still in the stack. I'm getting communication from my loan officer that, you know, okay, yeah, we haven't rejected your account. So with that being said, the only funds that I have is the portion of the EIDL grant, which was $1,000 per employee at the time of closing, which is enough to carry me through June. So with that being said, it took me approximately 3 weeks to receive those funds from the time that I signed up for the EIDL grant on the website, and that was just really a simple one-page electronic form that they had posted that essentially had your company name, your bank account number and routing number, your tax ID number, and your email. I'm pretty sure that that's all the information that they collected. Now that grant is, I did not apply for the EIDL loan yet, because applications are closed out from that. Essentially, to answer your question, Steve, it was basically 3 weeks from the time that I hit enter on that electronic form till the time that funding had hit my account.
Okay. All right. Good. Good. Dan?
So we applied for both EIDL and the 3P. So I'm trying to remember the date. So the EIDL, obviously when they rolled it out, as Brian mentioned, it was a little bit of a crazy mess of situation, and so I had filled it out on the 27th, I think, is when it first rolled out, and a couple things came out saying they're going to change it and that you had to refile and all this. Well, officially on March 31st, they came out with what they considered the finalized, and I reapplied on the 31st and was given an application number. So since the 31st until the 21st of this month, I hadn't heard anything, and I had called the SBA several times. As of this week, earlier this week, I did receive my initial advance for our employee side, so we did receive that. So something's slowly moving in the SBA side of the world to get through there. From what I've heard from the SBA is that the process will be probably 6 to 8 weeks maybe, because of how many applications they have. And so if that's the case, we're halfway through that, and I just started the process of getting money. The next step from what SBA has told me is we should be receiving an email from them to have a meeting with a loan officer from the SBA to move forward with the actual loan. As for PPP, that was all run through the banking side of the world. The SBA didn't really have anything to do with that, and so as soon as the information was pushed out, I got in touch with my bank, and as I'll explain to my frustration here shortly, is working with a smaller bank, we redid our paperwork multiple times, and it took well over a week for them to essentially apply it, and that was a huge issue. But fortunately, we were able to get in the system, and we did get our funding for that almost instantaneously as soon as it went through to the SBA side, because the bank was essentially waiting on the SBA to assign them a loan number so that they can get their backing protection before they issued funds. So that was in the process. From after it got filed, it only took 2 days for them to actually loan the money. To get through to that part, it took about a week and a half.
Okay. All right. So, Dan, you kind of already bled in a little bit to the next question, so I'm going to let you keep going on that. So the two programs, the 3P and the EIDL, I'll say EIDL, what's the frustrations you experienced with the 3P? as far as the process goes?
And this goes back to where I talked about network again with having a good bail team, and where I would have more resources now that I've gone through this. So my biggest frustration of this whole situation, as Brian mentioned, this is a time-sensitive situation. We all knew that as soon as the government opened this up, it was going to be a mad race to get the funding and get in line at least. And so even the night when this all was supposed to come about, nobody knew exactly what was going to happen. I stayed up all night constantly refreshing the website to see if there was any changes, because I wanted to make sure if there was something that came out at 12:01 on the morning it was supposed to come out, that at least I saw the information and start processing it. And so unfortunately it didn't come out because it is all through the banks. And so my biggest frustration I dealt with was the smaller bank that I worked with, that I banked with normally for the last 10 years, was not well equipped to handle this. And while I understand their frustration coming from the federal government side, that they weren't given a lot of guidance or anything like that, what this ultimately came down to is the bank was going to loan money and the federal government was going to back it. So it was on the bank themselves to process whatever they needed to do to get the process done. And one of the huge frustrations I had was one of the loan officers I was working with at the smaller bank sat there and fought with me about numbers and couldn't understand that the difference in two different reports that I was sending, one for payroll reports and one for a P&L for the year showing expenses, and that our numbers were off by like $125. And we ended up having to redo our paperwork and get in a fight about this because those numbers didn't match. And the issue is that a payroll report showing tax information does not start and end on a specific day as a calendar year of January 1 through December 31. So we sat there and went back and forth, and I ended up having to redo my paperwork and make my accountant go through and fix and try to come up with a report that would show exact numbers, which in the end didn't even matter because the PPP program changed our funding back down to a round number. And so we didn't even get the exact amount we applied for. They rounded it back down to the lowest rounded number. And so it was a huge frustration. And it took us a week to get this all done. Whereas a contact I had at a large SBA lender reached out to me as soon as his opportunity came about to open up to other clients. He asked me if I still needed assistance, and I was in the middle of this process. I said, most definitely. He's like, get me your paperwork, I'll file it, it'll be done in a day. I sent it to him, they filed it, and it would have been done the exact same day. It was the day the SBA shut the website down for maintenance. As soon as it came back up, the next business day, I got a call from a loan officer from that bank saying they already processed it all. So the SBA lender, the larger one, the bigger bank that I contact with, did everything in a day and was ready to file me in a day versus a small bank that took a week and a half. That's a huge frustration. Again, back to Brian's point, this is a time-sensitive thing. Getting in there and getting money is huge, and taking a week to do it shouldn't have happened.
All right. Okay, yeah, and in my classes and in my teaching, you know, a lot of times I will give the pros and cons of a large bank versus a small bank. And that small bank being able to go in and sit down with someone, and not over the phone, but sit down with them and tell them about your business needs. And that same person, you may see them on the soccer field with your kid at school. Right. Or they know the community. They know how vital your business is, and they know the need for your business. Whereas a large bank, not so much. But I guess in a situation like this, it's good to have that big bank in your pocket that has, you know, 1,000 times more staff and greater technology and deeper pockets that they can actually put out some funding to, I'd say, kind of fill in until the government comes with their guarantee letter, so to speak. So, okay.
And that's exactly it, Steve. I think that's, and again, I still love my local bank that I work with, the smaller bank. I still love them. They know me by name. You're right. They see me. You know, it's a great relationship in that. It's just a learning lesson for me that in this case, there are resources that could handle things better. And just like you mentioned, they do have the resources because, again, one of the things I had to sort of put myself in their shoes to realize is that if they're going to put out, let's just say, a couple $1 million in loans in a smaller bank, they don't have the funding available to do that. And if they put it out and it doesn't get paid back right away, then they're really in a bad position versus a huge bank that, like you said, has many funds that they could probably put out and not be hurt so bad so quick.
Right. That's right. Good. All right, Brian, you want to go ahead and share a little bit with us on that part?
Sure. My biggest frustration was the absolute lack of guidance and information that, information distribution from the SBA's level down to our neighborhood bankers, our local bankers. Even to this day, communicating with my loan officer at my local bank, she's unclear of what the current situation with the 3P and EIDL loan programs are. My accountant is also, doesn't quite have a full grasp of the situation on what is the true, for you use a Marine Corps phrase, what's the true scoop on it? There's just so much information that's been vomited out into the internet, and people have understandings of bits and pieces of it, but nobody I've spoken to has a true grasp of the entire scope of either program. And I've read, numerous frequently asked questions pages. I've been to the SBA webpage dozens of times to see if there's any updated information. Just understanding what the program entails and encompasses and requires is a huge knowledge gap that and I'm sure tons of other business people have. Dan and I are we're early adopters and we're self-educators, so we try to get schooled up as quickly as possible so that we can be a benefit to our friends in the business community. I have family members that are in the business community in their respective states, and they don't. First off, they're unaware of it, even though both the PPP and the EIDL programs have been, talked about ad nauseum in the press and everywhere else. Distilling that down to your local mom and pop business, that daycare provider, that dog groomer, for instance, that pet biscuit maker that's running a thing out of her kitchen with 2 employees, she doesn't know about these programs that are there. So information distribution and lack thereof is the largest, most frustrating part of this process. And then just like Dan, I had the same problem with my banker as far as my application was kicked back to me 3 times with a day in between the banker sending it back to me making the correction, sending it back to her sending it back to her chain. What should have been a 1 or 2 day process at most turned into a 10-day process for me to finally get my PPP loan, my 3P loan, accepted into their system. And then the lack of secure ways of transmitting documents. That to me was mind-blowing, that a bank that I deal with did not have a secure portal for me to upload my information that contains critical information about my employees, about my business. It had social security numbers and gross income and my tax number and my social security number and my gross income for my business. Not having a way to securely transmit that to the bank and then the bank to the SBA was just stunning to me. I actually had to print off all 60 pages of my entire last year's 941 documents. And for those that aren't familiar, your 941s are your quarterly tax payments for your employees. I had to print off all of my payroll records, all of my 941s, my P&L, and my, and the list of documents that the bank that my bank required was not what the SBA was requiring. I have friends that had applied for the 3P with a 1-page application, basically the SBA application, where my institution had this lengthy checklist of things that you had to forward along with your application. So the disparity in information required also was extremely frustrating, because one of my friends that did get a loan filled out a one-page application with an online banker, Lendio, I think was the company that he used, and he got his loan within 3 business days. And here I am, close to a month into the process now, and completely missed the first round of funding, and now hopefully I'm in the pipeline for the second round of funding. So lack of information, lengthy application process, and you know, lack of knowledge across industries are the three biggest friction points for me.
All right. Okay. Good. Good.
Real quick, Steve.
Go ahead, Dan.
So just real quick to go on with Brian's thing. So I don't know if this is going to be helpful, but one of the things I've been doing with this whole situation just to track, because like Brian mentioned, it changes on a regular basis. When I do check the SBA website or the Treasury website or any other the governmental websites about this kind of stuff, if I see changes, I'm printing those pages out and noting the date on those pages. And the reason is because I have a feeling somewhere in the future there's going to be an upheaval of trying to get this forgiven. And the direction that we've been given for the 3P program, there is no true plan right now for the forgiveness. They have set some very basic guidelines of you need to reemploy you need 75% of it to go to employment for payroll, and that by June 28th you need to be back up to the same amount of level of employment. Well, that's fine and dandy and all, but as Brian mentioned, the forms for processing that aren't out anywhere. So it's on us as individual business owners to keep meticulous records right now of what we're doing and how we're doing it. So much so that I actually went up and set a whole separate bank account open just for the PPP program. That money actually went straight into that bank account. My accountant set up a whole nother ledger just to process transactions out of that account, so that we have tried to separate it from our company as much as possible to track, and then keeping any kind of new updated information from the website. Again, I'm hopeful that at least some way, shape, or form it'll pay off in the end, and that we will be able to get this all forgiven correctly.
Good. Those are good points. I can so I'm thinking about when this whole program started to roll out. At least the first week there, every day the small business center directors across the state were being fed new information and changes. And every day there was some change, either expansion of parts of the program or more clarification. And each day I would at least read for at least a couple hours on things that were new. And it reminded me of working for one of the commanders while I was in the Marine Corps. He would use an example of painting a Corvette going 100 miles an hour, and we want 3 pinstripes. And we want them straight, okay? And don't mind the bumps and the curves and the changes in direction. So I think you're right with having a plan to be able to show back to the entity, your bank or the SBA, showing how you've documented the use of the funds, where they were spent precisely, and keeping them separate from anything else is going to be is going to pay off when it comes to having, say, an audit. And I think those rules of that audit are going to be changing as the audit process then starts, because not every small business is the same. There's little different nuances within a small business. And so as they begin that audit process, something will come up where they will then say, yeah, we need to adjust it based on what we've learned about a certain part of the country in this type of small business. So, but yeah, I think good point in keeping that. What you got, Brian?
No, I was in total agreement with Dan. I also have I'd set up, previously I had separate bank accounts for my operational account and for my employee payroll taxes. So conveniently, I hadn't been using that account. It had been sitting there idle with, you know, a couple of $100s in it. And when I did receive my distribution from the EIDL grant program, just like Dan, that money went directly into that separate account. I do not commingle those funds at all, so that when accounting does come, and it's going to, there's going to be a full accounting of these monies that were distributed to us. I'm able to provide the only thing that's coming out of that, and I set up a spreadsheet just like Dan that set my initial balance of X amount of dollars, and for every transaction that comes out of there, it's annotated. And in that spreadsheet, I also put, these are the only authorized uses for these funds. That's your rent, that's your mortgage expense, that's payroll, that's sick leave, or other, I think the last one was other things as necessary to continue operation of your business. That's pretty broad, but I will be only using it for utilities, for rent, and when I bring my employees back for payroll. That is all that money is going to be used for, because even though it's a grant and it's completely forgivable, even if I don't get a 3P loan, that money is technically mine. It's been given to me by the government, but it's upon me to use my taxpayer dollars to the best of my ability to keep my business open and not squander those funds or abuse those funds. And the trust that has been set up between the Small Business Administration, the Treasury Department, and Cracked It Escape Games. Those funds are to keep my business open, and that's all they're going to be used for. So when you know, when Uncle Sam asks, hey, Brian, how did you spend this money? I can print out that one-page spreadsheet and say, here you go. Here's every check that was written. Here's the date that it was done. Here's the time it was done, and here's what it was used for. Again, because we're trying to be stewards of the money that we were given.
All right. Good point. And also, Dan, you had mentioned that your CPA had a little bit different information on what was required. Your bank had a little bit different information. So I've even talked to a client who had received information from their association about the programs and what was allowed, what wasn't allowed. So we need one easy button, and thankfully here in North Carolina we have that easy button, and it's the NCSBC.net website, okay? And you go there and you get all the information on COVID-19 and all the loan programs and the updates. So everything that you need to know about what we're talking about today is all in one area, and it's updated constantly. The state team and some of the SBC directors in the state that are putting some time in to keep that updated, or reaching out, finding the information, and making sure it's the correct information and putting it on the website. So anyone that you know, please let them know that, and then anyone that watches this video later on will have that information. So a good source to have. All right, moving on. So let's move a little bit away from the loan programs and talk about employees. Brian, did you have to lay off any employees? And if you did, what was that process like? And was it easy to get that ball rolling, or some challenges? Tell us a little bit about what you experienced.
As of this time, all of my employees are laid off, to include myself. A lot of questions come up. You know, they did open up unemployment benefits to self-employed and to gig workers in the gig economy. They finally did open that up. Fortunately for me, I guess fortunately, some years ago my accountant had recommended that I set my company up, even though I'm a limited liability company. I'm taxed as an S corporation, and that she recommended that I become an employee of my company, a W-2 employee, just like any of my other employees, so that I, one, can properly pay my taxes, my self-employment taxes and things like that, as well as it did allow me to become, or to draw unemployment. I'm currently on unemployment. So to answer your question, I had 6 employees at the time that we closed our business on March the 15th. We closed our business ahead of the mandatory closure statement by the governor. When the governor said, hey, restaurants and bars are going to close, I made the call on that day to temporarily close my business, anticipating that entertainment venues would further be closed. And unfortunately, 8 days later, that call was made. So when I closed, I had told my employees that I'm going to continue to pay you so long as I have the funds to pay you. So I was going to pay them 20 hours per pay period for the time that we were closed. When that mandatory closure came down, I was like, okay, I really have no way to make money now. So I recommended to all of my employees, go ahead and file for unemployment effective March the 23rd, to include myself. Of the 6 employees that I had, 4 of us are currently drawing unemployment, myself being one, and 3 of my game masters. One of my employees did not work for me long enough to actually qualify for unemployment benefits, which is it's a whole separate matter as far as the unemployment benefits go. She only had worked for me for less than 45 days, so as far as the qualification requirements, she did not qualify for funds, and she didn't have a job before then, so she is essentially out of work right now, sitting at home, kind of biting on her nails and trying to figure out, what the next steps are. One of my other employees had a job. She worked 2 part-time jobs, and she's actually in the process right now of applying or qualifying for unemployment benefits, but because she currently has a job and her other part-time job, there's some dispute between the Unemployment Security Commission as well as her job. In fact, she just received a form yesterday. She has to fill out and return with additional proof of the dates of employment for things like that. The process has been incredibly frustrating. The Department of Unemployment Security Commission webpage is it's a black hole. So as an employer, it takes certain things for us to verify our employees' employment status at the time of closing. For me to do that, to verify 4 employees on the Unemployment Security webpage, it took me 4.5 hours of constantly refreshing, because every time I tried to enter new data for an employee, the site would crash and would prompt me to, I had to resubmit over and over and over and over again. So I can imagine a company that has 10, 20, 50, 100 employees, the incredible pain it would take to qualify even one employee to withdraw their benefits. So because as employers, we have requirements that we're required to do, and there's lots of folks out there that are expecting to draw unemployment, that their employers are not doing those things, are not going into their Employment Security Commission account and then verifying those employees and their status and the dates that they were laid off and the reason that they were laid off. It's about a 20 or 30 question questionnaire that you have to fill out for each employee, and then to do that just for 4 employees was excruciating. And then doing the weekly, and then flip to the other side as me drawing unemployment myself, having to go through that process. So not only did I see the employer side of it, I saw the person that's making the draw side of it, and the incredible pain that is with signing up. And again, just to verify myself, one weekend, 2 weeks ago, it took me an hour and a half to refresh the website continuously, just like Dan did earlier, to refresh the website continuously to answer 5 questions. An hour and a half to answer 5 questions to do my weekly certification so that I can draw the meager benefits that I have. On unemployment, though, and I saw an article on it this morning, the drawback to the 3P loan is when and if I do get a 3P loan, I have to bring my employees back on within 8 weeks of receipt of those funds. Now, including myself, we're getting, because of the additional funds that were in the CARES Act, we're all authorized an additional $600 per week to supplement the Employment Security Commission funds that we're receiving. My actual money that I get from the Employment Security Commission is very meager. It's but add that $600 a week on it, it's not too bad. Now, for me to tell my part-time employees that are making $300 every 2 weeks to say, hey, I need you to come back to work now, and then lose the opportunity to get that additional funds, they may not come back. But at the same time, I have to be the bad guy in the room to say, okay, I have extended you an offer of employment to return to work on such and such date. For my part, anticipating that I'm going to be closed through May, that date in the future is projected to be June 1st. So all my employees will understand that effective June 1st, I'm bringing them back to work. If they're drawing unemployment, if they don't show up on June 1st, I have no choice but to inform the Employment Security Commission that I have extended them an offer to return to work on this day. And if they don't, they lose their draw. As well as those funds run out in July anyway. So if we're not all back to work by July 1st, we're back to the same boat that we were prior to this. So the unemployment security has been a real nightmare, and I can understand the incredible amount of frustration that there is with it, and I can understand it from both the employer side of it as well as the employee side of it, because I'm on both sides of that coin, and it's incredibly frustrating, and it's scary. I have employees that are not getting money, that are not qualified for it, that are now, you know, out in the cold, and all of us are. So that's my part on the unemployment security.
Okay, good. Yeah, a lot of it is, you know, it's the first time doing it. Kind of like what I mentioned in my class whenever I talk about a Marine getting out of the Marine Corps. Well, how many times have you gotten out? I've never gotten out. Exactly. First time. Or how many times have you retired from the Marine Corps? Well, I haven't. I'm doing it now. So first time you're doing it, right. So there's a lot of questions to be asked and to be answered, a lot of uncharted waters. So many people have never been unemployed and had to or need to go to the NC Works and talk with someone there and understand, do I have benefits? What are they? How do I apply for them? How much is it? How long is it good for? It's a lot of questions that you really don't know to even ask, because most people, or probably a fair percentage of them, have never had to do that process until now. So a lot of uncharted water and questions, you know, to ask. Go ahead.
On that note, Steve, to get through to somebody at the Employment Security Commission is almost impossible.
Right.
You know, and that's NC Works right here in Jacksonville. They have somebody that answers the phone and takes a message, and then a caseworker will get back with you. Well, that caseworker will get back with you hopefully within a reasonable time. I understand they're swamped. I mean, I understand it 1,000%. The system was not designed to take the kind of load that it's taking right now. And these poor folks, God love them, are overworked, in some cases underpaid, and they're really trying to service us as best as possible. I cannot blame the good folks at NC Works for the deficiencies in the system. You know, the lack of functionality of the website, that is not anybody in that office's fault. Although they're the recipient of the anger and the vitriol that comes towards the Unemployment Security or the Employment Security Commissioner, NC Works, it's not. We're not angry at those folks. We're angry at the system. Right. And because those people are part of the system, they kind of get the flack for it, and there's no ill will towards those people. They're doing the best they can, and absolutely, you know, they'll answer the questions as good as possible. And also another point on it is we as employers need to be aware of fraud. I had been informed because as an employer I check my desk account every other day, basically, because I want to see if there's anything new that I need to pay attention to. I had seen that an employee that I formerly had that had left at some point before the new year had filed for this particular relief under my account and filed a claim against Cracked Escape Games when he hasn't worked for me in several months prior to this event going down. So I printed off that form and sent it back to the desk saying, hey, you know, this person doesn't work for me. So as employers, we all need to be cognizant of that as well, is that people may make a claim against you. And right now, our unemployment insurance is not being charged for these COVID-19 connected layoffs. So even though we're paying into our unemployment insurance, our accounts are not being charged for this. It's coming out of the larger fund. But it's rife for fraud. And I did file a fraud alert on this particular individual saying, hey, you know, this, I reported it as a crime. Again, we're trying to be good stewards of the funds that are allocated. And for this individual to be, you know, claiming against me, that's possibly taking funds out of somebody else's pocket. Or maybe he just messed up. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
so,
you never know. All right. Dan, how about you with employees?
So one of the decisions I made with this whole situation, being that we're in the pet care industry and it would be impossible for us not to be essential since we have animals on site, because we do board animals, and during this time, we're even boarding dogs for doctors and nurses and things like that right now because they're working so much. And so I had a meeting with my staff as soon as this whole thing started and explained to them that my plan was to remain open and run until I couldn't run anymore. And with that being said, that the staff that I had with me, I said that I would give them as many hours as possible and that we would go as long as we could. And unfortunately, some of the people decided to leave without, filing any kind of unemployment stuff and things like that. And with that, I didn't have to file any unemployment. And again, to Brian's point about checking the system, I've asked my accountant just to keep an eye out and go and check on that kind of stuff for us, just to make sure that we're not having anything hit our accounts. And with it, again, the staff I've had here, they want to work, and so I told them that as long as I could afford it, I would keep them employed and keep them a paycheck coming. They understand they could probably go and make more money on unemployment, and so it's tough for them, but they understand keeping a job for the long term is better than a short-term gain. And I think that's where part of the world is going to have a real hard time here. As Brian mentioned, those funds are going to run out come July. And while it's all happy and glorious right now, when the world comes to the real world again in a few months, or even shorter than that, because again, as we know, the government's running out of money quick, fast, in a hurry. So they say July is when those are going to run out, but I have a hard time believing putting out $13 billion a week is going to be sustainable for 8 weeks for the government. But hey, we can print as much money as we want, I guess. But the situation is that fortunately, I haven't had to file any of my staff on unemployment. I did have some staff leave. One had already made a plan to leave right before all this because she had some family things going on. And so it sort of worked out okay. And truly the staff I've had have worked extra hard because we've gone down to limited amounts. But they're working, 30 to 35, 40 hours a week right now. And again, the business we have coming in is not supporting paying their full paychecks, but or any of the other bills for that matter. But at least with the help of the PPP program and then our savings before that to offset the difference, I was able to keep them a paycheck coming, and that's our goal here. I told them from the very beginning that's my main worry, is to take care of them, to keep the payroll coming, and then everything else will try to work itself out. We'll see how that goes. But as of right now, that's where we're at. We're down very low on staff right now. Currently, I only have 4 people on staff, which is about 50% off where I would normally be at this time of year. So.
All right. Okay. All right. Good. So with this whole situation, Dan, I'm going to come right back to you. Have you has it made you rethink any aspect of your business?
Yes. One of the biggest things for us in our industry is that we are obviously brick and mortar. So there's not an option for us to board a dog in Charlotte right now or to service those animals anywhere outside of a small area of our existence. And so one of the things that's been happening over the years is that things like in-home pet sitting have become bigger and things like that. And we've been expanding or looking at those options to go into in-home pet sitting because it is a trend that's happening in our industry. But the other thing that I'm working on with this whole situation, and I've done some really hard thinking about it, is, and sort of like we had a conversation pre this class, was going virtual with things that we can bring another revenue stream in that would allow for us to reach through that side of the world, through virtual. Because I think one thing that's changed and that will not go back is that more things are going to go to the virtual world. Now, obviously, taking care of a live animal, you can't do that virtually. But what we can do is provide training programs virtually. And we've actually partnered with a training company of ours that we've been partnered with doing dog training. And that owner and I have both worked together to, one, put training programs together here at our facility to expand our services and bring our two companies together to provide value to clients across both sides to help us stave off this. But also, one of the other options is to add in classes or training virtually for pet owners. And one of the areas in our industry that I speak for is in our industry programs, and being able to provide that training would allow our company to have another revenue stream outside of working with clients day to day like we do here. And so one of the things I've definitely planned to step up is my personal education and training, where I'm going out and training for the company, speaking for industry conferences, and also speaking just in general for training, because a lot of our industry conferences are being canceled, but they're going to virtual just like we're doing right now. And so having that revenue stream coming to the company would be huge for us, because that's something we're trying to cover every base. You know, we can't meet in person, so we'll meet online. And as soon as we can't meet online because of some other restriction, we'll have to find another. So that adapt and overcome has been something that's been pushing in my head to move forward with. And again, looking at the bright side of this situation is we push ourselves and then we get sort of, you know, set back in our ways and like, yeah, whatever, I'll get to it. Well, guess what? Now it's a need. There is no option. We have to come up with a plan, and adding in that kind of training virtually, and even just doing evaluations and talking with clients. The same thing I would do normally in our lobby, working with our clients now and doing a virtual meet and greet and talking about it, about their dog and things like that could even be done. So we're definitely looking at options like that to move forward so that we have a revenue stream that cannot be affected like we are right now with brick and mortar.
Right. Okay. Brian, how about you?
Yeah, actually, it's I've done a lot of soul searching over the last 6 weeks. You know, the industry that I'm in, the escape room industry, and many other industries, axe throwing. You know, these niche industries where we group groups of strangers together in confined spaces. This model is not going to be sustainable moving forward. You know, the pre-COVID-19 world is not going to be the post-COVID-19 world. So we have to, in my industry specifically, look at ways of, we have to reformat our entire business model. I have shifted away from open ticket booking, where what that was is we would take groups of people, friends, strangers, or whatever, and we'd fill up a game until such time where all slots were filled. That could be Steve and April in one room, and then Dan and his friends come in and everybody joins together. That model is gone now. People will not want to get into a confined space with strangers. It was bad enough trying to control colds. Now we're talking about life-threatening illness. A big push has been recently, just like with Dan's business, has been started to bring the escape room experience online. So if you're not familiar with escape rooms, we take groups of people, we put them in rooms for 60 minutes, and they have that amount of time to solve a series of puzzles and challenges to accomplish a goal or mission. Well, now we're bringing this to the virtual world, and it's exploding, it's blowing up, but it's got to be done right. And I haven't jumped on that yet because I don't have the technological savvy at the moment to do it correctly and provide. If I'm going to charge people money to do something, I want to ensure that they have the absolute maximum best experience possible. And I can't go into it half-baked. And a lot of companies that are doing it are jumping into it half-baked. So just like with the industry as a whole, some are good, some are bad. But I don't want to be lumped in with one of those bad ones. Our record keeping, I think I addressed it earlier as far as the funds that I've received from the government so far. Yeah, I've set up an entirely separate record keeping stream to account for those funds. My personnel records are, you know, my general record keeping is pretty tight because my accountant makes it that way. She makes sure that I keep my stuff in one bag. So I do have to, and I think we talked about it pre-conferences, I really need to run the numbers to see if this business and this business model are survivable after we're allowed to come back. I'm not going to jump into it full stream. When the governor says, hey, North Carolina, we can get back to work, and we hopefully do it in a phased process, I hope that I'm in phase 3. And then I have a couple of weeks of seeing whether things are going to spike and whether or not this is, you know, we're becoming a danger to ourselves. Onslow County is doing really well. You know, as of yesterday, we only had 38 diagnosed cases and we had 1 death. Unfortunately, we only had, fortunately but unfortunately, we only had 1 death. So we're doing really well overall. given our population density and the sheer fact that people are out running around and, you know, in some people's words, not taking it seriously. But we're doing pretty well. I think we're going to do pretty well once we get open, but I'm not going to be the first one to kick open my doors and say, everybody get in here, I need your money now. I want to do it smart, I want to do it wise, and I want to do it you know, properly so that I'm not a danger to my clients, to my customer base, and my employees, because ultimately I have to take care of them as well. So yeah, I'm rethinking my entire business model. A long answer to a short question.
All right, good. Well, yeah, I was thinking while both of y'all were talking about that, you know, tonight is the first virtual NFL draft, and so Commissioner Goodell will be holding the draft from his basement in his house, and every player will be at their house waiting to hear what team they are getting an offer from and where they're at in that draft number. So it's a completely different environment. I think I've never been to the actual draft, so I wouldn't know, but you can imagine being in that auditorium and just the excitement of sitting there with all these other athletes and not knowing if, you know, when you're going to be called and to what team, and that feeling all that excitement. So in a virtual world, you don't have that. You know, and so it's definitely different than what we're used to. So just like things in the business history, if you look back over the past 100 years, there are things that pivot the business industry to a new direction. It's either you know, a catastrophe, a war, technology, customer demands or needs, and businesses pivot, or they add something else into their wheelhouse, and then maybe eventually they pivot to now something completely different from what they were doing before. So thinking about that, have you looked at anything kind of outside of what you are doing now, as far as, you know, maybe I should go in a new direction, and maybe based on your experience prior to business, what you did in the Marine Corps, what you did civilian life, and maybe if this is an opportunity to see another need, like logistics, you know, transportation. It's going to continue to grow because there's going to be more delivery services needed now because of people that are going to not want to go out maybe so much shopping anymore, or limit how many times they go out. And if I can get someone to shop for me and deliver it to my house and pay a little bit more, why wouldn't I? So either one of you want to, I know that's kind of off the cuff question, maybe either one of you want to share a little bit about that if you've had something like that come up.
Well, I'll go, Brian, or Steve. I guess with that, as I mentioned before, I have several other companies, and I think, you know, as we've all had time to really sit down and ponder what we want to do and move forward and things like that, we as business owners have to truly look at where we're going to go with everything. And again, taking the current company and maybe pivoting it a little bit and changing it, but also us as personal lives, where we want to go and things like that. And one of the things that I've really been working on, one of those companies that I have is a sort of an overall parent company that owns all my other companies. And underneath that shell, I have a training consulting company that I have already founded and worked with, doing speaking and training for our industry. Along with that, I worked on a mail order subscription service that I've been slowly working on. And then the third one is a product development for the pet care industry. Right now, I'm actually working, right now, this month, we were actually supposed to be doing our patent process for a product that I brought to Vanderbilt University to design and help me put together for the pet care industry. And so I guess the big thing with that and talking about changing directions, while I love what I do here and working with the animals and day-to-day working in the boarding and daycare world, this has opened up a light, like I mentioned earlier, that there's a need for other revenue streams and other resources that can't be affected by this situation. And so I've definitely made the plan to work harder on those. And they've been on my plate for a while. I've just now really looked at it and said, okay, I need to move these forward a little bit more and focus on them to get them up and running, because if one or all three of those were a little bit more robust, then in a time of need when this company is down, the virtual training and consulting side could be through the roof to offset that revenue stream. And so as a group, that would make us a lot more efficient and also profitable, so that we can, you know, stave off issues like this. So I've definitely been looking at those kind of things.
Yeah, okay, good.
And for me, Steve, so first off, I'll point to one of my greatest resources that I've had since I've opened, and that is the, like you said earlier, the North Carolina Small Business Center Network, ncsbc.net, if you want to go check it out. And I've learned so much from all of the classes that I've gone there. Not only, you know, I did 20 years in the Marine Corps as an infantryman. I learned a lot as far as leadership and inspiration and speaking and things like that. I would be extremely crushed and disappointed if I had to close my business, Cracked It Escape Games, after, you know, fighting for 4 years to keep it open, keep it through, you know, reopening after Hurricane Florence, rescuing myself, getting myself back on my feet, and then this is just one more punch that one more body blow that I'm ready to take. I'd be extremely disappointed if I had to close, but if I need to, I'm prepared to close, because I have learned enough life lessons and business lessons that I can find a new thing and a new niche to, you know, that I think I could be successful. I know for one simple thing, that I will never go back to work for somebody else again. I'm too busy. I'm too proud to be an independent business person, a lifelong learner, and an entrepreneur to throw in the towel this easy. Every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. My story at this point for this chapter may be at its end, but I don't think so. I think I'm going to do okay. I think I'm going to be able to reopen with a slightly different business model, but that's the joy of being an entrepreneur, is that we got to be flexible. We've got to be able to adapt, and like Dan had said, adapt and overcome. When we get thrown lemons, we make lemonade. You know, if life throws us a bunch of onions, I'm sure as hell going to make a bunch of onionade and, you know, do it as best I can, because that might be a new market for me. Nobody knows if you like onionade till you try it. So I'm going to find something new to do. I might come over there to Major's Barbecue and take that place over.
That's right. And if you say the word barbecue multiple times over a conversation of 15 minutes, you become addicted to it. So.
That's right.
All right, good. All right. All right, so kind of wrapping up a little bit here. We've been at it, I think, about maybe 45 minutes, maybe. So, you know, kind of my whole, I guess, summary of this COVID-19, what's taking place over the past month is, for everything that's gone on, the reactive skills of the government have been so-so. As far as coming up with a plan for loans and how they're going to manage them, and trying to roll it out as quick as possible, and at the same time then trying to answer questions about it. So, oh, we didn't think about that. All right, let's change this to that. And then, you know, it's 8 weeks of payroll. Well, my employees have already been gone for a month now. So when does that start? So a lot of things that have constantly changed, and they've had to look at, reevaluate, and then roll the plan out again and roll the plan out again several times. Hopefully, if anything, we learn from this whole COVID-19 is we need to have, kind of like, you know, what the Marine Corps has as far as planning goes, is we need to have a hasty planning process that we can ramp up to almost any kind of catastrophe and roll it out. You know, many years ago, before the Department of Defense was called Department of Defense, it was called the Department of War, I think, right? And y'all aren't confirming with me. Department of War, I think it's Department of War. But they used to have battle plans, war plans on the shelf of past wars and how the war was fought and what took place, from start to finish, and then you could pull that plan off and utilize it. And so, just like an emergency preparedness for hurricanes, tornadoes, there's a plan that most counties, communities have of how they respond and what firemen do, what EMS folks do, what the government does to respond, and how they run that catastrophe. So this is, you know, financial and employment catastrophe combined with a health catastrophe. So it's got a mixture of several things, and how do you manage it? So I think at this point where we're at now, hopefully there will be a lot of lessons learned that will be collected and then evaluated to decide how do we mitigate the risk of this again and lower it and have a better response time to small businesses as well as large businesses. I think a lot of people were surprised at the definition of a small business when you see some of the businesses that have applied for loans. You think, wow, that's a large business. Well, by SBA rules, they're a small business. And so I think there's a lot of education that we can do amongst ourselves and helping each other and other small businesses, knowing about the government, what they have to offer, and then how we need to be prepared ourselves with our accounting documents or financial documents being readily available to turn into the bank to receive funds, and then our banks having a roadmap, so to speak, to roll out and be able to process a loan and be able to have an escrow account of funds where they could, you know, provide some kind of security to small businesses. So there's a litany of things that you could come up with, but I think appreciate everything you shared with us today, and from start to finish, from what took place and how you've handled your operations and your business. Completely different businesses, but all business models are the same with just a little bit different look at them and how they're painted and designed, but the nuts and bolts usually are about the same. And so I appreciate your time and going through the questions and sharing with us what you've experienced, how you've handled it, and what you see in the future as far as your company goes. And hopefully we've had some good dialogue to kind of jog some thoughts about pivoting in certain directions and being a little bit more agile in our business and being able to adapt to changes. Because like I said, things change and you don't have any control over them, and you just have to be separate gumby and go with them. I was telling my wife at dinner the other night that the civilian world is getting a little taste of what the Marine world is used to. And I can remember during the Gulf War, we left, and they told us we left in August. They said we'd be back by October. When October came, well, you'll be back by Thanksgiving. And we're on a ship sitting out in the Gulf of Oman. Thanksgiving came, so you'll probably be home before Christmas. Christmas came, and we're still out there. So eventually we made it back. But just the constant changes, not knowing, and being confined on for me, an LST, which is a landing ship tank, which is very small. You can hold about maybe 500 Marines and sailors together max. That's a lot of people in a small space for several months. So you get an appreciation for being able to walk outside and enjoy the fresh air and your freedom that we have. So it's been an experience, I think, for all. So let's go around the table. Any last parting words or comments? We'll start with Brian.
Well, first off, thanks for allowing me to come on today and speak and impart my pain and my knowledge. It's been rewarding for me. We are going to come through this. What the world looks like when the government does allow us to reopen is going to be different than what it looked like when we closed. But working together, our small business community in Onslow County is fantastic. Our chamber, our small business center, they are great resources for us. The light is always darkest in the tunnel until you're nearing the end of it, and you don't know if that's a train coming at you or if it's actually the light at the end of the tunnel. So with that being said, I just want to encourage all my friends in the business community that if you're not taking classes at the Small Business Center, you need to. It's the best free resource that you're ever going to have to supplement your knowledge, supplement your, add tools to your toolbox. This is the, we talk about sharpening the saw. This is the way I do it every single month. If I can, is to get at least one class in my toolkit. Add something to my knowledge base, and it helps me improve how I do business. So April, Steve, and when she comes back on, and all of the small business center directors, thank you for all of the awesome programs that you put together for us, and specifically being good stewards of the state's funds and the SBA funds and putting on awesome programs for us. So I appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Brian.
My turn?
Yes, sir.
Well, yeah, to reiterate what Brian just said, thank you for having me on and letting me share some of my struggles and frustrations. While it was a little bit, down, hopefully it'll give everybody some reassurance that even if they are junior in business and not 100% sure what's going on, that they're being, they're in the same boat that the rest of us are as senior people in business and doing this. We're all going through this together, and this, again, as we talked about, an unprecedented time for this, and we're all learning at the same time. So, like Brian said, keep up on your education and training. If you are an entrepreneur, again, it's never going to hurt you to know more. And I think one of the other big parts, Brian led this at the very end, he felt, and again, I'm not quoting you, Brian, but I think you said something about you're okay if you have to shut your company down, right?
That's what I actually.
You there, Brian? Okay, well.
Yeah. I was unmuting. Yeah, that's exactly right. If I have to shut it down, I'll be very disappointed, but I'm prepared to do so.
And I'll end with this, because one of the hardest things that I've had to do over the last couple of weeks is really sit there and think about where I want to go with things. And again, for us as entrepreneurs, we all understand. We love the struggle of business. We love the idea that tomorrow's never going to be the same as today, and stuff like that. But one of the hard things we have to realize is that in Brian's case, in my case, things like that, maybe there's going to be a major change that we can't overcome. And even if we are able to get thousands and thousands of dollars in free funding from the federal government and, low interest loans and all these other things, that maybe it's not meant to be. And one of the things I've had to make a decision and talk with my wife about and really plan for is, if this all goes through, and again, we've applied for the programs and we've got the funding, but in the next 6 months, who knows where we're going to be at, and if this industry is going to be where it's at. I don't know if I want to spend the next 10 years paying off, $500,000 in debt to run the company again. We've done 10 years, we've gotten to the point where we're doing really well and things were moving perfectly fine. And then we got to this situation. So it's a real heartache for business owners like myself and Brian and everybody else that's dealing with this, that is it worth going back into debt hundreds of thousands of dollars? And every business is different, don't get me wrong. But again, for an industry like mine where our facility is 8,000 square feet, we've got a lot of equipment and materials inside, it's not cheap to run. And so is it going to be something we're going to be able to sustain? And the other part is can I handle the level of anxiety to have a $500,000 loan on my head? A lot of people just think businesses run. They don't understand that while the employees are getting paid, the owner of the company has a $500,000 loan on his back that somebody's got to pay. And if the company's not doing well enough, that money's still got to go somewhere. And granted, the government's doing, what they can to set off 6 months and say, oh, well, hey, it'll be okay. We'll give you 6 months not to pay anything and all this. Well, at some point, there's going to be a breaking point, and they're going to have to get their money back. And unfortunately, most of the world does not understand that that money's got to come from somewhere. We, as business owners, understand it comes from us. If the company's not doing well, then we are financially responsible. And Brian's mentioned it many times of being good stewards of our money. Well, remember, you got to be good stewards of your own personal money. And is it really worth that kind of situation? I still haven't made a 100% decision on what I will do when we get to that breaking point, if we get to that breaking point. Hopefully we won't. But as of right this second, I don't know, and I don't think I will be going into debt hundreds of thousands of dollars just to keep a company running with the undetermined future. So I hope everybody understands that, and while I love what I do and things like that, it's very, very hard to make that decision. But I also have to remember that, this affects not just me, it affects my family, and if my company goes bankrupt, that means I go bankrupt. And is that really worth it? So it's just a tough situation, and I know even junior business people out there that may not think that's going to happen, you have to be planning for that, because you never know what's going to happen in this world. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we're seeing right now is for the last 10 years, we've had a really good economy, and we've had a really good bull market that has just skyrocketed industry and business and entrepreneurship, and everybody thinks it's easy to go and get funding and just start a business. Well, guess what, guys? This is the real world of business. Granted, this is the extreme side of it, but I think this is eye-opening to a lot of people that have just floated along and thought, oh, well, business is great. I can just go get a couple $1,000s from a bank and start a business, and life will go on. Well, right now, this is what we as entrepreneurs deal with. And it may not be at this level, but we deal with this on a lot of things. And so hopefully it helps open up people's eyes to where we're really at in business. So.
Yeah. Good. Good. Okay. Great. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Dan. April?
Sure. So I want to thank everyone for participating, Dan and Brian and Steve. We really appreciate all the information that you've provided to the small business owners in our network, and we will be sharing this content as much as possible. In addition, if you would like to participate on April the 30th, we have a webinar that's going to have a conglomeration of people that are participating, including our regional director, Don Fry of the Small Business Administration, some loan packagers, and a lender that are going to all participate, as well as some small business center directors to kind of further answer some specific questions that you might have. So if you wanted to ask the SBA a question directly, that might be a good training session to participate in. That is going to take place from 11 a.m. to 12:30. If you would like to register, you can visit our website, as Brian and Dan and Steve have all mentioned, which is sbc.net. Click on the black training button. From there, scroll down to Coastal Carolina Community College and click search. On there, you'll find on April the 30th the link to register for that webinar. In addition, we have a great series coming up, Side Hustle Saturday, the COVID-19 virtual edition. We're going to kick things off on May 1st with a pre-session that do you have the entrepreneurial mindset? Going to run from 5 to 7, and then we've split the training into 2 separate days, so you don't have to devote your entire Saturday to it. On May the 2nd, we'll have our first day of training that'll run 3 separate sessions that starts at 9 a.m. and concludes at 12:30, followed by our final day, which is going to be on May the 9th. So if you'd like to sign up for that, same situation applies. Visit our website, click on the training button, find it on Coastal's page, and register for those. Again, thank you guys so much for watching. We hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.